In this video, I'd like to talk about the difference between building yourself up, growth, and having to rebuild yourself after being psychologically destroyed by a woman, where you don't feel like you know who you are anymore. I think that's a reason why guys tend to like sports. There are relatively fair rules that everyone plays by, and if you didn't get the results you wanted, you could regroup and better yourself, and next time improve and maybe win. But the losses would be instructive. Better yourself, engage in the sport again, and get some success, and know why you did. But the way I used to go about relationships, and I would say by the conversations on these videos, very many men also go about relationships, is that the sport changes all the time without you being informed. You think it's one sport when in fact it's changed into something else. There's no clear rules, and there's very little clarity about how you should play. Yet everyone seems to be playing. It's the only game in town, apparently. You know, there's a very big difference between not succeeding, learning from where you went wrong, whether it's sport or building things in life or going down one sort of path where there's a progression. And it also builds courage. Having the courage to play a sport and get better because the rules are fairly clear and it's up to your effort, picking yourself up, regrouping, learning, and then going further and further and knowing why you do because of your effort and your skill and your thinking. It's very different to relationships where the other person, namely from a guy's point of view, women, they keep changing the rules where you don't know what you're going towards because it all depends on how she feels from week to week. There's a courage in taking the risk to start a business or play sport or progress yourself or write a book or do anything long term. And there's a difference to being constantly demoralizing and not having one clue where you went wrong other than being told by everyone else.
I'll just try again, human.
And you try to get some sort of answer as to, all right, but how? Because I've tried this way and that way. And the answer is, pick the right girl. How? And even if you go about picking according to how they think you should pick and where and how, when it doesn't work out and you've done everything the best way you can, it's still your fault because you haven't picked the right girl. And yes, I know there's a case to be made for that's life, human, things begin and they end. But in the civil conversation between a man and a woman, if you communicate, you say where you stand, and then all of a sudden you're seemingly a different person the next day, it really feels like a betrayal, like you were lied to. And the other person will say, no, I didn't lie to you.
I just feel differently.
But you did. If you promise the day before and then the day after you feel differently, you've lied. Either that or do not promise. I think this is where most guys get frustrated because women in that moment will promise. They'll promise the world, and this is how they truly feel. Now though, this is how they feel now. And if you ask them, are you sure? They almost look at you insulted, saying, of course I feel forever today. Again, I've mentioned this in videos prior where guys really mean the words they say because they have to stand by them, because in a man's world, a man's word is his bond. Not so with women. A woman's word is not her bond. A man needs things to make sense. A man cannot just navigate his life with feelings as the primary. But what myself and most guys in the comments and that I talk to about relationships keep coming up against is a woman's changed feelings. And that's fine. But my problem is, don't promise forever. But it's not romantic, you see. The notion for me is that it was always frustrating that I was clear, I was on the path going in the direction that we both agreed on, that we're both talking about. And then I noticed a distance, a lack of communication, and every time I asked, there was nothing wrong apparently, but my intuition said there was. And so I wasn't going to keep pushing and cause an argument and make something wrong. I'll trust what she says. You're supposed to trust what your partner says, aren't you? But then all of a sudden, your intuition is right, and when she said nothing was wrong, everything was wrong, but she didn't tell you, and all of a sudden it's come to a head and she feels like she doesn't want to be in the relationship anymore. It's the wasting years of your life trying to be honest and sincere, and the other person not being honest and sincere, telling you they are, and then somehow she has no remorse, and everyone around you, your family and friends, still think it's largely your fault because you should have read the signs. This is the demoralizing effect. This is why it wears a man out, and that's why when men get older, women scratching their heads and saying, men have given up. I mean, here's an analogy. Imagine I spend years writing a book, and I know full well that it might not work, but I have a clear vision of my effort that I put forward. But then at the end, my publisher, who promised to pay me, doesn't pay me. I don't get royalties. I don't get anything that was promised. And then afterwards, the publisher and everyone out there is annoyed that, human, why don't you just write another book for this publisher? It's like, well, I'm not going to waste another 2 or 3 years of my life writing a book for a publisher that's already shown me that they can't be trusted. Sure, you can go to another publisher, but if every single publisher betrays you, goes back on their word, it's only a matter of time before you self-publish or you approach writing in a different way where you don't let it die, or logically, you give up writing. Because what's all the effort for? Your love for the craft is being walked all over by unscrupulous people who can't keep their word, and they want to profit from the effort you put into this relationship of writer-publisher, just like men feel between man and woman in a relationship. Why would you blame the guy for eventually giving up writing? Because what's the point? He may as well just write in his notebook, never publish it to anyone, never collaborate with a publisher, and just keep something for himself. Keep that little creative spark of life without it being trampled on. It's the starting from zero that's demoralizing. As I said, growth, progress, calculated risks. You keep failing until you succeed, but there's a forward momentum. There's a progress a man can feel. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 5 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps back. But if it's 20, 30 steps forward, and then not 20, 30 steps back, but 50 steps backwards where you're in a negative, you're so demoralized that you don't remember who you are anymore. You are shattered. There is a difference between trying, failing, but progressing forward, and being completely destroyed by someone seemingly intentionally because they lied, they didn't speak up, and you're made to feel like a clown. And everyone laughs at you, but the little girl who can't help her insecurities and doesn't communicate gets off scot-free. She doesn't think it's her fault. Society doesn't think it's her fault. It's mostly your fault because you don't understand women, yet women don't even understand themselves because they can't explain why they changed their minds or felt differently other than, I don't know what. That's the weather. She's unpredictable. And the thing I'm talking about here is the psychological rebuild for guys. Men are used to building and rebuilding things. Houses, bridges, their bodies, going to the gym. There's pain, effort involved. There's progress a few steps back, but there's a clear indication of where you went wrong and where you need to improve. But the psychological rebuild is where men are demoralized. We don't know how to rebuild. We keep having to rebuild from zero, finding who we were before the relationship to rebuild from that zero. Women are much more skilled at psychological manipulation, rebuilding, bouncing back. They're used to it with the games with their girlfriends in high school, growing up with other women. Say to the face of a girl that's in front of them, "Oh, you're amazing, you look wonderful, you're beautiful." And the moment that girl goes away, they'll say,
"What a bitch."
That kind of flipping and saying one thing, but meaning another, changing your mind from moment to moment, that is what a man is not used to. Because with guys, when we say, "Good for you, you look great," or "You did that well," we mean it. When the guy walks away, we don't go, "Yeah, I was just lying, that guy's an idiot." We don't say that. This psychological demoralization is the rebuild that they can't pick themselves up from or find it very hard. This is why one of the pieces of advice from guys is always to go back to your hobbies, to re-engage with who you were before Chicky Poo. It's hard to rebuild your faith in women, love, and the optimism of something in the future with somebody. And I think that's why guys rely on their hobbies, because their hobbies, when you wake up the next morning, is still going to be there. The book I was writing is still going to be there to be written. There's the progress I made. The book isn't going to disappear. The house I'm building isn't going to disappear. There's a consistency there. But women aren't consistent, and that is the struggle. And the psychological stress men have is that we want to build with women into the future, but like everything else men can rely on to stay as it was yesterday, women don't. And they don't communicate, yet they say we don't. And I think that's projection, because women say one thing but mean another. They want us to do the communication for both people in the relationship, and it's really unfair. There was a really good comment recently by one of my members, Verro, where he said, "Time is precious, and I don't want to waste it rebuilding myself anymore." Time is precious. Don't waste it, gentlemen. Rebuilding from zero all the time in the same way. Look, I advocate going about it in a different way. So by all means, if you're still interested in women, I would encourage you to go about it in a different way. So if you want to risk differently, risk better, risk more intelligently until you're done. There is a very, very big difference between trying and failing and progressing forward and doing things differently and seeing some sort of progress, and wasting years of your life doing the same thing over and over again in exactly the same way. Reflect, gentlemen. Modify your boundaries so they're better than they were yesterday, and stop wasting your time, as Verro said, rebuilding yourself over and over again, because we just don't have time. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Join the channel, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye, guys.